Okay, so good day, guys. So this will be the discussion on mood disorders and suicide. So with this particular chapter, it's just like anxiety disorder. It's a bit long, so I urge you to have breaks in between para hindi siya masyadong taxing. And also, again, to please write down your notes, the questions that you want to clarify for this particular topic, and of course, um, the DSM-5 TR notes. Please also look into that for any changes because, again, the slides are based on DSM-5, and we are now at DSM-5 TR. Okay. So to start off, this is the outline of our discussion. So it seems to be relatively short, but believe me, it's longer than that. So we're going to be first defining mood disorders, and if you would see, the mood disorders are categorized or subdivided into two categories. So we have the depressive disorders, and then the bipolar disorders. And then after that, we're going to be discussing the prevalence of mood disorders, the causes of mood disorders, and of course, the treatment. And then after that, we're going to be discussing suicide. Now, suicide is put under this category because of the fact that um, mood disorders are the group of disorders with the highest mortality rate among all of the psychological disorders. Okay, so what will be our focus questions? So these are the things that we're going to be covering in the discussion. So hopefully this will be answered. So para pag may iba na kayong tanong, yun na lang itatanong nyo sa ating synchronous class. So first off, what are the clinical features of a mood disorder or mood disorders? How does the prevalence of mood disorders change across the lifespan? What factors contribute to the development of mood disorders? What treatments exist for mood disorders? And what is the prevalence of suicide? And what are the risk factors for suicide? Okay. So in this particular slide, let's try to understand first what are mood disorders. So, in the previous disorders, we tried to understand what is anxiety. So, ayusin muna natin to, or mas intindihin muna natin what does it mean with mood, and how does the mood become an impairment, and what makes it a disorder. So, just like with any other disorders, pag sinabi nating mood disorder, there is a gross deviation in mood. So, what do we mean by gross deviations? So, usually when we have moods, or if you would go back in your gen psych and other lower psychology subjects, mood is the more prevalent state of the affect, or the emotion, whereas the affect, it's just a state, so sandali lang siya. And then when we say mood, ito nga yung emotionality natin, but it has uh, in terms of duration, mas enduring yung duration niya. So, gross deviations, pag dinagdag natin yon sa meaning ng mood, um, it means to say merong kakaiba doon sa display or manifestation niya ng mood. Like for example, um, in terms of the duration, the person's mood had been the same for some time. Hindi na siya nagbago. Parang like constantly hopeless or helpless yung feeling niya. Constantly depressed siya. So unlike other people na parang the depressive or the sad state or sad emotion is only displayed when the person had experienced really sad situation. So, yung sa kanya, regardless kung may ganun siyang situation na na-experience or wala, the the mood or the depressed mood or the down mood had persisted or is persisting. And then it is composed of different moods or episodes. So pwedeng depressive mood siya or depressive episode yung tinatawag nga natin, or pwedeng manic episode. Sobrang ano naman, taas ng energy niya, sobrang daldal niya, sobrang totally the opposite of when the person is depressed. So ayun, nagfa-fluctuate siya in between, walang nasa gitna na kasi pag nasa gitna, depending on the situation itself, saka lang ganun yung ipapakita niyang emotionality or affect. Ito, regardless kung ano nangyayari, persistent na ganun yung pinapakita niya only for a certain period of time, especially for mania. Now, the periods of depressed or elevated mood lasting for days or weeks includes the major depressive episode, the manic episodes, and the hypomanic episodes. Now, this is where it gets tricky, ha? So, just like with other disorders, you will be able to differentiate what's manic and what is a hypomanic episode. So, mamaya pag-uusapan pa natin yan further. Okay, so let's try to understand first what is major depressive episode. Now, a major depressive episode, this is a presentation of an extremely depressed mood and loss of pleasure. In clinical terms, we call it anhedonia. So, pag sinabi natin loss of pleasure, um, the person doesn't find things enjoyable anymore. Like, for example, kumare, uh, mahilig siya manood ng Netflix or YouTube. But then the person doesn't find it anymore entertaining or enjoyable for him or her. And this particular situation or symptom, usually for them, it lasts for most of the day, or yeah, uh, they would feel it almost 24 hours, and the duration is about for 2 weeks. So again, with this one, it doesn't mean that 2 weeks talagang ganun yung feeling niya, but consistently the person had been noticing that this is how he or she is feeling. And then there are additional physical or cognitive symptoms. We are going to be discussing it further mamaya. Nasa DSM-5 criteria siya. Titingnan natin. And also, please check out your DSM-5 TR while we are discussing this. So, nandito for indecisiveness, feelings of worthlessness. So, these are all cognitive symptoms. Fatigue, appetite change, restlessness, feeling slowed down, as well as sleep disturbance are within the physical symptoms. Okay. Now, when we look at it closely, the DSM-5 criteria shows that to be able to diagnose someone with major depressive episode, there should be 5 or more symptoms that had been present in a 2 week period and represent a change from previous functioning. Meaning to say, hindi siya ganon before, and evidently there is a big change with how the person is functioning at present. And then doon sa 5 symptoms na yon, at least one of the symptoms should be the depressed mood or loss of interest or pleasure or the anhedonia. Okay. Now, you have to eliminate this diagnosis if the person is feeling these symptoms because of a general medical condition. Again, there are conditions that uh, have similar symptoms due to the side effect of the medications that they are taking for their existing condition, or if it's a mood incongruent delusions or hallucinations. So sa um sa different disorder na yan, yung schizophrenia and psychosis. So later pag-uusapan natin yon in the following weeks. So with this one, the person would experience depressed mood most of the day. Yan. You would know this in the interview, so they would report feeling sad or feeling empty, or the observations that others would make. So again, it's sometimes helpful for you to the the report of other people, kasi nga at times hindi hindi accurate yung report ng mismong client. So, when you feel that hindi enough or hindi sufficient yung details nila, you have to get another person's report about this matter. Okay. So, in children or adolescents, the depressed mood can be manifested through irritation or irritable mood. Okay. Number two, so there should be a marked diminished interest or pleasure in all or almost all activities most of the day, as indicated by either subjective account or observations made by others. And then number three, significant weight loss when not dieting or weight gain. And it should be around 5% of the body weight in a month. So the decrease and or decrease, increase or decrease in the appetite is seen nearly every day. With children, it should be failure to make expected weight gains kasi nga they are again in the developmental stages, in the crucial formative stages of their development. So you have to consider this for them. Okay. And then we people with depressive who experience major depressive episode also tend to have this one, insomnia or hypersomnia. It's either they cannot sleep or they sleep too much. So most of the time yan yung ano nila nafe-feel. And then number 5, psychomotor agitation or retardation nearly every day. So when we say psychomotor agitation, this is the feelings of restlessness, hindi sila mapakali, or retardation, ayun, parang ang bagal-bagal nila kumilos, tamad na tamad sila. So, ganun yung ano nila, ganun yung kanilang pinapakitang behavior. And then, number 6, fatigue or loss of energy nearly every day. So, um, ito yung mga reports at times na sasabihin nila, kakagising ko pa lang pero pagod na ako. So, may mga ganun silang sinasabi sa clinician. Or pwede rin number 7. Now, these are more of the cognitive symptoms, feelings of worthlessness or excessive or inappropriate guilt, which might be delusional. So, please look at it carefully kasi baka mamaya may delusions na rin pala sila. Because that would make, that would be a specifier for the diagnosis. And nearly every day, not merely self-reproach or guilt about being sick. So, this one you have to also look at this carefully. I had a client before who told me na she's feeling guilty kasi nga sabi niya, hindi ko maintindihan bakit ba ako ganito. Na minsan tuloy na parang I cannot say the exact words, but the context was that parang minsan nagigilty na siya kasi nga the psychiatrist and her therapist are all doing their best to help her out, but dahil nga she feels that she's not getting better, she feels guilty about that. She feels na yun kasalanan niya kahit na ginagawa ng mga professionals yung trabaho nila. And then there is also a diminished ability to think. So this is, yeah, to think or concentrate or indecisiveness nearly every day. So most of the time they would feel that they cannot focus on the things that they should be doing. So for employees yon, hindi sila makafocus sa work nila. For students, they cannot focus on their studies. Even though they would say that ina-attempt ko naman or I do try to focus on it, pero talagang hindi ko kaya, parang minsan nagbablanko na lang sila. So yun yung sinasabi nila sa reports nila when you interview them. And then there are also some people who would have suicidal ideations, wherein they would have thoughts about death. It's not that they are afraid of dying, but they would have the idea of, what if I just end it? And some of them would have no plans, some would have an attempt, or some would have a specific plan for committing suicide. So just like with my a client last week, it was red flag na kagad. Nag-send siya sa akin ng message na pag uwi ko dyan, papakamatay na ako. So, that is already a specific plan for committing suicide. So, um, and when I asked my supervisor, kasi my supervisor talked with the client earlier because I was not available during the time that the client wants someone to talk with. It was my supervisor who stepped in para nga makausap siya. My supervisor and the doctor also have the same assessment regarding yung suicide risk niya. So, ayan, sinasabi nila yan at times. Or they would say it in a very simple way. Akala mo nakipag-usap lang, but then they are already saying their plans or planning to do it. Okay. And then of course the symptoms cause clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. So, yan. Sometimes, ito nga katulad ng mga client ko, they cannot focus on their work anymore because of what they are feeling, and how the symptoms are making them feel, basically. So, hindi na nila magawa yung trabaho nila, and pati yung mga trabaho nila sa bahay. Like, for example, yung maglalabas sila, magluluto sila. So, kaya yung iba talagang pumapayat kasi nga, they don't really have the energy to be motivated and to do this stuff for even for themselves. Kaya nga may iba na hindi na naliligo kasi even taking a bath or even doing your basic hygiene activities are it would take a lot of effort from you. And then, of course, the symptoms should not be due to direct physiological effects of a substance. So, just like other disorders. Kasi nga, again, it would be a different diagnosis if that is the case. Okay. Next. Okay, so let's try to understand naman what is a manic episode. Now, understanding this is very important para makita nyo what's the difference between bipolar 1 and bipolar 2. Wait lang. By the way, the diagnostic criteria na pinakita ko sa inyo, hindi pa yan kumpleto ha. Kaya nga, again, you have to look at the DSM-5 TR kasi may mga notes pa doon na hindi ko na sinama. Baka kasi, kaya ako hindi sinama or hindi na dinagdag kasi baka maging 100 slides pa tong for this chapter na sobrang dami na. Hindi na maganda for an academic material. Okay, so I hope you do understand that. Okay, and this is also why you have your books and other references. Okay. Now, with the manic episode, pag sinabi natin may manic episode siya or mania siya, there is an elevation of mood. And the mood is expansive. Expansive in a way na parang ang dami niyang energy and the person feels that he or she can do anything that he or she would put his or her mind to. So parang in other words, parang high na high siya. Ganon level ang pagka manic niya. So typically a manic episode would last for at least 1 week. And these are some of the examples of the symptoms. Now, when we say there is an elevated sense of self-esteem, they have this ayun, parang sobrang yabang na nila or sobrang taas ng tingin nila sa sarili nila. And it's not because of their personality na mayabang sila per se. It's because they are going through a manic episode. So you have, again, to know the difference between the two. Kasi there is a big difference between sa taong sadyang mayabang and sa taong nagme-mania at that time. And then there is a decreased need for sleep. So, kaya nga sabi ko sa inyo, high na high sila, 'di ba? Yung mga taong nakatake ng certain type of drugs, they have this same symptoms. Kaya nga you have to look at it carefully. Baka kasi yung manic symptom na nakikita nyo ay hindi pala because of the mood disorder, but because it was caused by substance. And then they talk excessively. Again, it's not yung parang sobrang hyper niya, sobrang daldal niya, and then ayun, ang dami niyang ideas, like for example, ang tanong mo, kumain ka na ba? Tapos um ang hindi niya sasagutin directly yung tanong mo, sasabihin niya, ay, ano, kumain kami kahapon sa ganto 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 ganto. Masarap nga dun eh. Tapos maya sasabihin niya, ano nga ulit tanong mo? Parang nasagot ko ba yung tanong mo or hindi ko yata nasagot yung tanong mo. Kasi nga the flight of ideas or parang literally uh, the ideas are just racing through the person's mind. Kaya ang dami nilang sinasabi, kaya rin hindi nila um, ma-track asan na ba sila na topic. And then they have high or they are easily distracted. Kaya makikita nyo rin yan sa kanila. And they have increase in goal-directed activity or psychomotor agitation. Ayun, very restless nga sila. Pag tinanong mo, ano ka ba, lakad ka ng lakad, or kanina ginagawa mo to, ngayon naman yan ang ginagawa mo. It's because they feel very restless. They have this feeling that they should be moving. And for some people, yun nga, this is why they do a lot of things na parang feeling nga nila they can conquer the world because of the mania that they are feeling. And then they have when they are in a manic uh, mood or nagmamanic episode sila, they have or they tend to get involved excessively in pleasurable but risky behaviors. So I'm not sure if you have watched that ano ba to, Crash Course Psychology, but there is one psychiatrist who have bipolar 1. Ganyan ang ginawa niya. Nung nagkaroon siya ng bipolar attack, she spent a lot of her money buying all of the books published by Penguin Publication dahil daw parang kailangan ma-free ang penguin colony or something like that. Anyway, I will be putting the link for that particular video in the TBL Hub. So yun, that was a risky behavior, 'di ba? So imagine if you are a millionaire tapos may access ka sa pera mo and then manic episode ka at that time. Tapos naisipan mo, bilhin ko kaya lahat ng ice cream shop dito. Or bilhin ko kaya lahat ng ice cream dito sa ice cream shop na to. So that's a risky behavior because it's totally out of control and 'di ba? Unang-una hindi mo naman makakain lahat ng ice cream sa isang shop. There are also instances that they would either either they would do impulsive spending or sexual behavior. They would also show that through sexual behavior. And then, of course, it causes impairment in normal functioning. So you can just imagine if you are a doctor with mania or with bipolar disorder, tapos at that time that you're supposed to be seeing your clients, bigla kang inatake ng manic episode mo. So you can just imagine how it's going to cause problems in the person's practice as a doctor. Okay, in with a person who is going to be diagnosed with manic episode, um, if it's lasting for less than a week, um, the person can be hospitalized. There is a bigger chance that the person needs hospitalization for manic episode, and this is because of their tendency to get involved with risky behavior. So a lot of instances the professionals in the field would advise for hospitalization para ayun nga, para mapigil yung kanilang risky behavior. Unlike pag nasa bahay lang sila or they are on their own, mas mataas kasi na yung chances na gagawin nila yung behavior na medyo highly impulsive, not medyo, highly impulsive and highly risky. Okay, so let's look at the diagnostic criteria for manic episode. So for criterion A, distinct period of abnormally and persistently elevated, expansive, or irritable mood, and abnormally and persistently increased goal-directed activity or energy lasting for at least 1 week and present most of the day or nearly every day, or any duration if hospitalization is necessary. So take note of this one. Kasi sa lahat so far ng mga disorders na discuss natin, ito talaga yung kung kailangan i-hospital mo na. Hindi siya yung 'di ba? Kasi yung so far ang nakikita natin mga outpatient or in the case of somatic disorders, ayun naman siya yung may gustong magpa-hospital if care seeking yung specifier niya. And criterion B, during the period of mood disturbance and increased energy or activity, 3 or more of the following symptoms. 4, if the mood is only irritable, should be present to a significant degree and represent a noticeable change from usual behavior. So, the following symptoms are this. So, unang-una ito nga, yung inflated self-esteem or grandiosity. So, they have this inflated sense of self that they feel very important, or they feel that, yun nga, they feel that they can do anything kasi it's part of the features that they have. And then this one, decreased need for sleep. It doesn't really mean that they are not going to be sleeping, but there were patients before na na-encounter ako when I was doing my internship na may bipolar, and when I asked them how was your sleep, so sabi niya, um, okay naman. Tapos pag tinanong ko ulit na parang, like, ilang oras yung tulog mo? Kumbaga, yung dire-diretso ba? Kasi nga, again, we have to also ask them those things para mas makita nga namin kung nagre-respond ba sila sa gamot, or if they can be tested during that day, or if they are lucid enough to be tested. So, minsan may magsasabi sa amin na, oh, 2 oras lang yung tulog ko nga eh. Tapos, pag tinanong mo, oh, 2 oras, di ka ba inaantok? Kasi baka kailangan mo pa ng tulog, ganyan-ganyan. Pwede natin sabihin sa nurse. Sabi, hindi, okay lang. Maganda pakiramdam ko. So, ayan, they have this sense of feeling refreshed or rested, even though they only slept for the for less than the recommended amount of sleep. And then they tend to be more talkative than usual. I also had this type of patient in my internship. Sumakit yung kamay ko sa dami niyang sinabi. I was doing the intake interview with the patient. Dami niyang sinabi, and then dahil nga I was focused on just jotting down the interview, nung binasa ko na siya, nung nire-write ko yung interview notes ko, uh, saka ko lang nakita na walang common theme or walang main idea yung kanyang pinagsasabi. And then almost all of the answers were keep on derailing, meaning to say walang connect doon sa tinatanong ko. So, it's also connected with number 4, flight of ideas or subjective experience that thoughts are raising. And then number 5, distractibility, attention too easily drawn to unimportant or irrelevant external stimuli as reported or observed. So, um, the patients that I had with when I was doing my internship before, ayon, they tend to be easily distracted at times. So this is why pag nag OJT na kami, where we are advised uh not to put anything on us that is or that might call their attention, like for example, yung prescribed uniform lang dapat ang suot namin. Wala kaming mga iba pang koloretes sa katawan. Like, for example, yung mga medyo eye-catching na hairpins, or yung, di ba sa ID natin, minsan nagsasabit pa tayo ng uh, ng kung anong charm, 'di ba? Or minsan yung picture ng bias natin sa K-pop. So yun, ina-advise kami not to do that kasi nga it's going to distract the patients. We're also advised not to use cologne or perfume kasi for patients who are quite sensitive to smell, it might also cause a distraction for them. And then number 6, increase in goal-directed activity. So I have mentioned that already in the previous slide. Okay. So for this one, just take note na pag sinabi nating manic episode, these are the symptoms, you have to take note kung gaano katagal yung duration niya, and at the same time, ilan ang mga symptoms na kailangan niya. Depending on the conditions, no? Pag hypomanic episode kasi, it is almost same symptoms, however, it's less severe in terms of the duration and also the manifestation of the symptoms itself. So, same pa rin siya ng mga symptoms, yun lang. Kung si manic ay 1 week, si hypomania naman is 4 days, and the presentation of the symptoms is less severe than the manic episode. So like for example, to give you an idea what I'm talking about, yung number 3 symptom, akala mo madaldal lang siya, pero symptoms na pala yon. Di ba may mga taong madadaldal talaga yun, parang di na nawalan ng kwento. Um, pero pag tinignan mo siya or in-observe mo pa siya in the following days, baka mamaya hypomania pala yung pagkadaldal niya. And it's not a personality trait. Okay. So this one, I think I already mentioned that one in the previous slide. Pero yun nga yung just to reiterate, ayan, activities that have a high potential for painful consequences like unrestrained buying sprees, sexual indiscretion, or foolish business investments. So, actually, may ganyan kaming naging case. Um, Nagkaroon ng mania yung asawa niya. And, parang, during that manic episode, uh, ginawa ng asawa niya, parang namigay ng mga gamit sa bahay nila. And one of the things that the person gave away or sell or sold off was a family heirloom, yung mga vase, yung mga vases na parang porcelain, Chinese porcelain vase or vase in other ano other pronunciation. Pinamigay niya ba yun or parang pinagbili niya? I think pinagbili niya. Kasi if I remember correctly, kasi ang tagal na naming client yun eh. Ang tagal ko na naging pasyente yan. Pinagbili niya yung vase na yon na parang minanapan nila sa ninuno nila um, for 10,000 pesos. But the vase actually costs millions of pesos. So, fortunately, dahil yung kapitbahay nila, alam yung kondisyon nung asawa niya, kasi ang nagreklamo yung asawa eh, uh, binili ng kapitbahay. And then, later on, parang sinabi niya dun sa asawa, and binalik yung vase. Then, binalik ng asawa yung pera. Kasi, 'di ba, kung ibang tao yung nakabili nun, ang sakit nun. Wala pang one fourth nung presyo, nung value talaga nung heirloom yung nakuha mo for that particular object. And of course, the mood disturbance is sufficiently severe to cause marked impairment in social or occupational functioning, or uh, to necessitate hospitalization to prevent harm to self or others, or there are psychotic features, again like with the delusion. um the episode is not attributable, so again, it shouldn't be because of the effects of substance and any other medical condition. Full manic episode that emerges during an antidepressant treatment but persists to a full syndromal level beyond the physiological effects of the treatment is sufficient evidence of a manic episode, and therefore is a bipolar 1 diagnosis. So, kunwari, ang ibig sabihin nito is that kunwari initial diagnosis is um, depression lang, pero naggagamot na, pero lumalabas nga yung symptoms na to. The diagnosis should be put as a bipolar 1 instead of depressive disorders. Alright. So, ito naman si hypomanic. With the hypomanic, ito nga yung sinasabi ko sa inyo, same symptoms but shorter and less severe version of manic episodes. So, it lasts for 4 days and it has fewer and milder symptoms. So, with the hypomania or hypomanic episode, the associations is less impairment than a manic episode. So, meaning to say, they don't really, they would have the same features, but they don't buy the whole store, or they don't have sexual relations na kung sino-sino lang, kasi may mga ganong uh, cases na pag nagmania, and then the person felt the sexual urge, ayun, kung sino-sino na lang ang uh, i-engage niya for sexual, uh, yeah, sexual promiscuity. Okay. So before they say that it's not problematic in and of itself, but usually occurs in the context of a more problematic mood disorder. Before kasi medyo dina-downplay nila ang hypomania, pero in the recent edition of the DSM-5 TR, nakita nila na almost same lang pala ang impact ng hypomanic episode with a manic episode. Yun nga lang, the duration is shorter, and uh, the display of the symptom is more or less, more or less um, less evident or blatant. Okay. Okay, so another would be mixed features. So with this one, meron siyang kasi there are some disorders na hindi mo siya masasabi na bipolar or bipolar 1 or bipolar 2, pero meron siyang manic features. More or less depressive siya, pero hindi siya bipolar 1 or bipolar 2. Same with this one, hindi niya nami-meet yung full criteria for depression or anxiety, and mas prevalent yung mania niya. So, ayan, mixed features yung tinatawag natin dito. So, this is where it gets tricky. Kasi nga, dahil nga similar yung mga symptoms, hindi mo makita kung alin ba talaga yung pinaka more prevalent, if it's the depression or if it's the mania or if it's anxiety. So you really have to understand and look closely in order to have the proper diagnosis. Okay. Okay. So where are we? Okay, so with the structure of the mood disorder, huwag kayo magtataka with the unipolar concept. That was how it was called before. So unipolar when the only one extreme mood is experienced. So it's either mas prevalent yung depression niya or yung mania. So before they would call it as unipolar. Okay. And in this particular diagnosis before depression, they have seen that depression is much more common than mania alone. So, meaning to say, um, usually pag nagda-diagnose sila ng mania, it comes with the depression. Whereas with the depression, hindi all the time na may depression and then it comes with mania. Okay. Now, with the bipolar mood disorder, so kaya siya tinawag ng bipolar, it means that both the depression and elevated moods are present or experienced by the client. So, ganun yun. Kaya nga, bipolar. Because there are two polar opposite moods that are experienced. So, ang ibig sabihin nun, the client would sometimes have experience or episodes of depression, and there are days or times when they would experience either manic or hypomanic episodes. Okay. So aside from that, we have this one, the depressive disorder. So again, sabi ko nga sa inyo kanina, it's not all lumped under one category in the DSM-5 TR, but rather pinaghiwalay nila. So we have the first group, who are or which are the depressive disorders, and kasama dito si major depressive disorder and persistent depressive disorder, And then the disruptive mood dysregulation disorder. These are new diagnosis to DSM-5. And the other one, the premenstrual dysphoric disorder, and disorders due to um, substance induced depressive disorder and medical condition. Yung mga hindi natin masyado in-specify kasi may iba siyang particular cause. So basically, we are going to be focused on this four: the clinical depression na tinatawag natin, the persistent depressive disorder or the cyclothymia, and then the new diagnosis or new disorders under this category. Okay. Now, with the major depressive disorder, this is the clinical feature: one or more major depressive episode separated by periods of remission. So, ibig sabihin, hindi dire-diretso yung depression nila. May times that they are okay, but there are times that uh, parang hindi. Or nandun, kitang-kita yung kanilang symptoms. So there are two distinctions for this. My single episode, which is from the statistics and studies, this is a highly unusual diagnosis to see. And then there are those who have recurrent episodes, which are more common stat for for the clients or the patients. So ito, ayan, at least one major depressive episode. So nasa uh, kaninang criterion siya. Balikan nyo na lang kung nakalimutan nyo. And then, of course, with the B, it shouldn't be because of other disorder like schizoaffective disorder, schizophrenia, schizophreniform disorder, delusional disorder, or other specified and unspecified schizophrenia spectrum and other psychotic disorders. So, take note of that kasi um, uh, may ganun ding features kasi na may kinalaman sa mood ang schizophrenia spectrum disorders. And then, to be able to diagnose major depressive disorder, there shouldn't be any manic or hypomanic episode. So, pag nagkaroon yon ng ganong episode, meaning to say na kuha yung diagnostic criteria or na-meet yung criteria for either manic or hypomanic episode, then it is not major depressive disorder. Okay. Specify the clinical status or feature of the current or most recent major depressive episode. So, again, if it's a single episode or a recurrent episode, you also have to specify if the the display of the symptoms are mild, moderate, or severe, or if it has anxiety features or with anxious distress, with mixed features, with melancholic features, atypical features. So, all of these are going to be presented more explicitly in the DSM-5 TR. So, this is why you really need to read that kasi pag nandito lang sa slides, hindi nyo siya maintindihan kung ano yung mga features na yon. Okay. Next is, yan. Pag persistent depressive disorder naman, which is, there is at least 2 years of depressive symptoms. So, may depression siya and it has been going on for, uh, ano ba to? For at least 2 years. And then the depressed mood is seen most of the day on more than 50% of the day. So let's say, for example, 1 week, the depression is observable for at least three to 4 days. And then there are there are no more than 2 months of symptom free. So meaning to say, hindi siya dapat or the presence of the symptoms should be there for not more than kumbaga hindi siya yung totally symptom free for more than 2 months. Otherwise, hindi na to gantong disorder. Okay. Okay. So, mm, okay. So, going back to what I was saying, the depressed mode, ayan, hindi dapat siya symptom-free for more than 2 months. Otherwise, it's not a persistent depressive disorder anymore. It might be just major depressive episode or another disorder. Pero kasi this is the requirements or the criteria in order to be diagnosed as such. And then the symptoms can persist and change over long periods. So, uh, less than 20 years. Again, kaya nga siya tinawag na persistent depressive disorder. The symptoms are there for more than the time that was said for other types of mood disorders. Okay. And there are periods wherein the depressive symptoms might be they might show a symptom which is more severe. Ayan. Pero hindi siya constant na ganon. So I hope you understand what I'm saying. Ayan. And then, major depressive symptoms may be intermittent or last for the majority or entirety of the time period. So, again, it can be within the duration of a major depressive episode or more than that. And then, when we say persistent depressive disorder, it means that any depressive mood disturbance that lasts for majority of days across 2 or more years. Okay. So, the term that we use for this one is dysthymia or dysthymic, wherein it is a state of mild low mood. So, before, yun yung tawag namin dito, dysthymia, for a persistent depressive disorder. So, yan na yung tawag dyan ngayon. Okay, next. Next one. The types of PDD or persistent depressive disorder. So we have the mild depressive symptoms without any depressive episode. So ito yung pure dysthymic syndrome. Okay, and then we also have the mild depressive symptom with additional major depressive episode occurring intermittently. Before it was called double depression. This was in the SM40R. And then, bakit siya double depression? Kasi nga, mayroon ng mild symptoms, meron pang symptoms ng depressive, major depressive episode. So, and then aside from that, we have the major depressive episode lasting for 2 years with persistent major depressive episode. So, these are the different types of the persistent depressive disorder. Okay. Next. Okay, so for a major depressive disorder or dysthymia, the depressed mood for most of the day or more days than not indicated by either subjective account or observation of others by at least 2 years. So in children and adolescents, it should be irritable mood or more of the irritable mood rather than depression for the duration of at least 1 year. Okay, so if you would see, it's still pretty much similar with the symptoms of the major depressive disorder or episode rather. So poor appetite or overeating, insomnia or hypersomnia, low energy or fatigue, low self-esteem, poor concentration or difficulty making decisions, and feeling of hopelessness. Ang kaibahan lang dito is that suicidal ideations, hindi siya masyado lumalabas as a symptom for this one. And then during the 2-year period, the disturbance of the person has never been without the symptoms in criteria A and B for more than 2 months at a time. So, laging may presence ng mga symptoms na yon. And then the criteria for major depressive disorder may be continuously present for the 2 years, and there had never been a manic episode or a hypomanic episode, and the criteria have never been met for a cyclothymic disorder. Now, the cyclothymic disorder, ito naman yung persistent na mania or hypomania. So, parang kabaligtaran naman siya ng dysthymia. Okay. And of course, the F1, it shouldn't be better explained by another disorder, particularly yung nasa schizophrenia spectrum disorder. And then next, symptoms are not attributable for physiological effects of a substance or another medical condition. And of course, it should be causing clinical disturbance or distress and impairment in social, occupational, and other important areas of functioning. So again, for the specifiers, it would be helpful if you read it in the DSM-5-TR. Okay. Now, kung titingnan mo to, ayan, date onset, um, if the onset is at the age of 21 years old or older, so meaning to say, dito lang siya first na diagnosed with the said disorder, kasi usually it's younger pag nada-diagnose siya. So late onset siya pag na-detect siya ng 21 years old. The pure dystemic syndrome, ayan, major depressive episode had not been met in at least the preceding 2 years. Persistent major depressive episode, if full criteria of major depressive episode had been met throughout the preceding 2-year period. Okay, and then there are also this one in full remission or partial remission. So, meron na siya dati and bumalik ulit. And you have to take note if it's full remission or partial remission lang siya. And then let's see the representation of the disorder here. Okay. So the horizontal axis represents the time, and the vertical axis represents the mood. The horizontal black line represents the euthymic or the normal mood, and the magnitude of the downward deflection of the blue area reflecting the severity of the symptoms. So panel A is a non-chronic major depressive disorder here. So ibig sabihin, hindi siya paulit-ulit. So this is how a non-chronic depression happens or looks like in a graph. And then okay, however, since there are uh two data here and this is here, it's non-chronic, but there is kumbaga nagkaroon ng 2 episodes, may recurrence. And then panel B, here's the panel B. This is the persistent depressive disorder with pure dystemic syndrome. So kung makikita mo in terms of how low is the mood, comparably with the others, mas malapit siya sa normal mood or sa euthymic mood. Okay. C is double depression. Ito yung tinatawag na double depression. May ano siya, persistent depressive disorder here. And then nagkaroon siya ng major depressive episode during the course of the dysthymia. So, yan. Ito yung nasa dysthymia siya, and this is the major depressive episode, and then going back to dystemic. And then the D1, chronic major depressive episode. So yan, diretso lang siya, sobrang baba, 'di ba? So nakikita nyo na yung difference between the major depressive and uh, the dystemic disorder or persistent depressive disorder. And then the panel E is a major depressive episode in partial remission. So, yan. Ito yung depressive episode niya. Partial remission. Ayan. Hindi na ganun ka-severe yung symptoms niya. Partial remission yan. And F, ayan. F is a recurrent major depression without full inter-episode recovery. So, yan. So, meron siya ditong symptoms or manifestation ng major depressive episode, and then in between there is the dysthymia, nagkaroon siya ng dysthymia, and then bumalik ulit sa major depressive episode. Okay, so using this presentations will help you understand better ano ba yung mga pinagkaiba ng major depressive and dysthymia or persistent depressive disorder. Kasi nga, if you're just going to listen to my explanation, it's pretty difficult to understand with just what I'm saying, especially if you're a person who's quite ano, who's quite uh, a visual learner. So, mas maganda na makita mo to at intindihin mo rin to. Okay. Now, for specifiers, may mga additional specifiers tayo. Again, we have to understand these specifiers kasi it would mean a lot for the client because the specifiers can help the practitioner to come up with better intervention and management for the case. Okay. So sabi niya nga dito, specifiers are not mandatory and only assigned if appropriate. Uh, so although it's not required, kasi nga hindi naman lahat ng disorder or lahat ng diagnosis ay may specifier. But kung applicable siya, you should put it there. Okay. Okay, so may mga specifiers such as this, psychotic features specifiers. So, ang psychotic features or psychotic symptoms na sinasabi natin ay hallucinations and delusions. So, sometimes there are clients or there are patients who would have depressive episodes together with hallucinations or delusions. So, pero hindi sila psychotic per se. Yung features lang. So, pag may ganong experience or may ganong episode, or may ganong naranasan, you also have to put it there. So, when we say hallucinations, this is sensory experience with the absence of sensory input. So, meaning to say, walang ganong stimulus, pero meron siyang ganong sensory experience. Like, for example, may narinig siya, pero wala namang sensory input ng sound waves. 'Di ba? So, kumbaga, na, na-process yun, parang may na-perceive siyang sensory experience, however, there is no sensory stimulus from which the perception came from. Basta may narinig siya. So, that's hallucination. Whereas with delusions, these are more on the cognitive beliefs na which are more or less inaccurate. So, kumara sabihin niya, jowa niya daw si ganto or asawa niya daw si ganto. Pero iba kasi yung iba kasi yung pag uh, fan, 'di ba? Kumari asawa mo. Pero to kasi yung level of delusion niya is talagang over the top. Like for example, sasabihin niya ayun. Like yung sinasabi ko nga lagi sa mga estudyante ko pag boboto sila, if the politician says something that is parang malapit na sa delusions, wag mo nang paniwalaan, wag mo yung iboto. Because medyo pangpasyente yung kanilang beliefs, and I don't think they should be holding a government position and being in a position wherein they are going to make laws and policies. Like for example, yung sinabi dati ng isang presidente na uh, he will make the Philippines like Singapore and in his term, or he will eradicate drugs within 6 months. Those are delusions. Diba? Very persistent siya dun sa belief na yon. And we know that it is very illogical and it's very irrational. And even the 20 pesos na bigas, gagawin 20 pesos na bigas, that's delusion actually. Okay. So, tamaan na matamaan, pero that's the truth. Okay, looking at it in an abnormal psychology perspective. Okay, and then we also have anxious distress specifier, wherein the depression comes with significant symptoms of anxiety. Again, the person does not have anxiety per se, or diagnosis for anxiety disorder per se, but there is a feature of anxiety. And usually when the person has this feature, the prognosis is guarded. Okay. And then we also have the mixed feature specifier, wherein the depressive episode have several manic symptoms, but not the full manic symptom to diagnose it as an episode. Okay, again, it's different from the two. And then we also have the melancholic feature specifier, okay, wherein it's accompanied by severe symptoms such as early morning awakenings, lack of reactivity to positive stimuli. So, like for example, nakakita ng cute na baby or cute na aso, wala siyang response. Or lagi siyang maagang nagigising. So, melancholic feature yon. And then, the catatonic feature, this is a extremely rare uh, specifier. But, usually, itong mga may ganito, they have this, they are in the parang position ng body nila is still stupor, meaning to say yung para silang mannequin or statwa na buhay sila, yes, and they are not doing that intentionally. Or yun, waxy limbs that remain in place when manipulated. So, di ba usually pag tinaas ng ibang tao yung kamay natin, binababa natin yon. Even when we are asleep, di ba binababa natin yon. But a person with catatonic feature, depression and catatonic feature, a specifier, when you put the hand up, alisin mo yung kamay mo, nakataas pa rin yung kamay niya. So, ganun siya. Or repetitive or purposeless movement. So, like for example, tinataas niya lang yung kamay niya, pero paulit-ulit, tinataas niya, wini-wave niya, pero wala naman siyang kinakawayan. Wala siyang hinahawi or what not. Walang purpose yung ginagawa niya. And the other one is a typical feature specifier, presence of several symptoms, which is less common in depression, including oversleeping and overeating. So, meaning to say, yun yung pinaka-prominent na feature niya. Yun yung pinaka-nakikita. Pero this is not that common in a depressive person. Okay. And then another specifier, 'di ba? Dito ka lang malilito with depressive disorders talaga, the specifiers. Kasi you have to really see saan ba siya nanggagaling. Like, for example, a lot of, I had a lot of clients before during the height of the pandemic, not the height, 2021. Kasi nga, di ba, nakulong tayo for several months beginning March 2020. So, marami na buntis dahil nga nasa bahay lang, nakakulong. And then, after that, ayun, ang dami na nagre-report sa akin ng may depression sila. And then, when I look back, or when I ask them, it turns out that they just gave birth. Yan. So, it's pag sinabi niyang peripartum onset, the depression occurred around the time of giving birth. Another is the seasonal pattern specifier. So the depression occurs primarily during certain seasons. Usually it's winter. So there are stats like that. Tumataas actually ang reports ng depression whenever it's coming winter. Even here in the Philippines, kahit hindi tayo nakakaranas ng winter, but the fact that um, the nights are longer, and also it's the holiday season, and then wala kang pamilya or na malayo ka sa pamilya mo to spend the holidays with. Ayan, tumataas talaga yung statistics for depression around this time. Okay, so it's sometimes known as the seasonal affective disorder. um, Ayan. And it's the result of the phase-delayed circadian misalignment, meaning that the patient's circadian rhythm is misaligned with the environmental day-night cycle. And this might be effectively treated with light therapy. Okay. So the onset and duration of depressive disorder, actually, it's quite rare in childhood. Kasi nga, um, the person doesn't really encounter a lot of stressors, especially in childhood, unless they are in a situation that is abusive environment, or uh, yeah, very anxiety provoking environment. So yun yung mga contentions doon. And then however, the risk increases in adolescence and young adulthood, and decreases in the middle adulthood, and increases again in old age. So it pretty has a U-shaped pattern pag tiningnan mo sa statistics or sa graph. And then the depressive episodes, actually it varies in length. There are wala pag tinanong mo kung gaano katagal siya nagtatagal, hindi ko na masasagot diyan kasi nga it really depends on the it's case to case basis. So, yeah. For some, it might last for several months if it's untreated. For some, it might last for several years. Okay. Okay. Now, what you're seeing here is the results of the Hamilton Depression Rating Scale score for dystemic disorder patients with or without concurrent major depressive disorder episode, and patients with non-chronic major depressive disorder over a 10-year follow-up record. So the red line, these are the patients with dystemic disorder and major depressive disorder. The blue line is patients with purely dystemic disorder, and the purple line is patients with non-chronic major depressive disorder. So, kung makikita natin, in terms of the rating scale here, pinakamataas yung may mga dystemic disorder and major depressive disorder, even in the time of months after they did the test. Sila pa rin may pinakamataas. Ang may pinakamababa is yung may non-chronic pattern ng major depressive disorder. Ang laki din ang binaba nila dito. And then, patients na, or group na hindi masyado nag-vary yung score nila, or parang malapit lang din sa score nila halos, are the ones with pure dysthymic disorder. Ayan. Okay. So again, please take time to study this graph para mas maintindihan nyo yung pattern ng depression. Okay, now this is a very good topic to discuss pa because in the DSM-5 meron na tayong prolonged grief disorder, but we will be discussing it in other chapters. Hopefully maabutan natin yon. But for this one, for this one kasi, or when I was studying, pag nasa kalagitnaan siya ng grieving or bereavement, hindi siya pwedeng ma-diagnose with depression. So, ganun siya yung ruling niya before. So, ngayon, ang nakita ng mga scientists and practitioners is that depression can occur as part of the grieving process. Yun nga lang, mas naging complex na yung pag-detect niya kasi nga hindi mo makita if the sadness comes from the loss or if it's sadness talaga because of the major depression. Okay, so with this one there are different criteria or different categories for grief. So we have acute grief that occurs immediately after the loss, integrated grief, which is eventually coming to terms with the meaning of the loss. So yun, medyo na-accept niya na yung pagkamatay nung kung sino man namatay. And then complicated grief, the persistent acute grief and inability to come to terms with the loss. So may mga ganito na um, matagal na or kumbaga 1 year na halos namatay pero hindi pa rin siya makaget over doon sa pagkamatay and yun, hindi niya pa rin ma-accept yung pagkawala nung kung sino man nawala sa kanya. Okay. Another depressive disorder is the premenstrual dysphoric disorder. Now, the premenstrual dysphoric disorder, it's not the PMS na sinasabi natin for women, ha? Hindi ito yung PMS na sinasabi natin. Kasi, it's more than that dahil meron tayong mga symptoms na severe for this one na talagang nag-occur siya before the menstruation. Okay. So there is at least 5 symptoms that must be present final week before the onset of the menses. So kasi usually, 'di ba, doon naman natin napapansin for the girls ha, and for the knowledge of the guys here. Usually we would feel the menstruation coming a week before it comes. So ayan, at yun na yung sinasabi nyo na tinutoyo na kami or uh, it occurs in different ways so may like in my case physically I break out, nagkakaroon ako ng mga pimples noon aside from being stressed. So may pimples ako either sa mukha or sa likod or sa chest area. And then, ayun, medyo may mood swings na rin ako noon. So, parang lahat kaaway ko. Or, minsan, ayun, nagpo-food trip ako during those times. Ang lakas ko kumain. So, those things, pag napansin ko na siya, and before, I would also have migraines. I would have migraine attacks a week before my menses. So, pag nagsabay-sabay na sila, alam ko na, the following week, meron na ako nun. Pero yung premenstrual dysphoric syndrome, ayan, 5 symptoms must be present in the final week, improve days after the onset, and minimal or absent in the week post-menses. So, ito yung mga symptoms niya. Kung makikita yung mood swing, sensitivity, so these are just common, irritability or anger. But if, ayan, minsan nagkakaroon ng ganito, yung iba, so it's not just PMS, it might be something else. It might be PMDD. Okay? So depressed mood or may tension or anxiety, decreased interest in usual activities. So kaya alam ko wala akong ganito eh, kasi a week before that, medyo ang sipag-sipag ko. Parang nagsasayaw lagi ang brain cells ko. Daming pumapasok sa isip ko na nagmamanik ako yata. So, and then, difficulty concentrating, usually, people who would have this one. Or girls who would have this one. Lethargy is also seen. Change in appetite, as well as problems in sleeping and feeling out of control and physical symptoms are also seen. So, unfortunately, with some, hindi sila nadadiagnose with this one, and there are still some people na hindi tinitingnan yung ano niya, yung ano ba to? Hindi tinitingnan tong, or some HR, yung mga practitioners, kasi yung pag mag-absent, hindi siya tinitingnan as an excuse for absence. Kaya nga ano, very thankful kami na may ganito ng classification as a disorder, kasi it's a valid condition na. Kasi ang PMS, they don't look at it as a valid condition. Although it should be put as a valid condition. Okay. And then another is disruptive mood dysregulation disorder. Ito naman more on sa mga bata to. Um, there is a severe temper outburst occurring frequently against a backdrop of angry or irritable mood. So, ito lagi siyang galit. Tapos, it can be only diagnosed in children of 6 to 18 years old. And the criteria for manic and hypomanic episodes are not met. And it is designed in part to combat overdiagnosis of bipolar in youth. So, kaya may gantong disorder na ginawa. It's because, ayun nga, in the past, nakita kasi nila na tumataas yung ano, yung diagnosis ng bipolar sa mga bata. Kasi nga, if we would go back doon sa symptoms niya, ang nakalagay sa kanya, 'di ba, instead of depressed mood, irritable mood sa mga teenagers and children. Kaya ang nangyayari, it's either dahil nga hindi masyado na diagnose naman ang depression sa mga bata, ayun, sa nailalagay sila under bipolar disorder. So, yun yung naging problema nun. So, ano bang meron sila? So, usually, do we have recurring temper outbursts? And, yun, laging galit yung bata or laging tunotopak yung bata. And the outbursts are inconsistent with the development. So, like, for example, kasi we would see immature actuations sa mas bata na population, right? Like for example, di mo napagbigyan yung 3-year-old sa kanyang gustong bilhin sa mall, 'di ba? So, yung pagwawala niya, yung paggulong-gulong niya sa mall, expected yon. However, if a 7-year-old or a 10-year-old would do that, that is inconsistent with the development, kasi at that age they should be able to accept logical explanation na as per the developmental stage of development in terms of cognition. So, kumbaga, hindi siya uh, hindi siya congruent doon sa development niya for that age, yung kanyang actuations, actions, or behavior. And this happens for 3 or more times a week. There is also persistent irritability on the part of the kid. And the onset is usually seen at 10 years old. Okay. So this is, I think we have, yeah, this is the last disorder for the depressive disorders. Maybe you can take a 10-minute break or a 15-minute break. Stretch ka muna dyan um, para ma-refresh ang utak. And then another complicated discussion na naman tayo with the bipolar disorders. Parang lalabas pala to na 3 parts. Okay. So let's take a 10-minute break. Pause nyo muna yung recording and we'll resume after.